Okay, I have 6 o'clock, so I'll call the meeting of the Plan Commission to order. If we'll have the roll call, please.
Pat Dorr,
Present.
Dion Jones, Kimberly Remack,
Present.
Jim Shumpert, Diane Singer,
Here.
Donnie Singh,
Here.
Steve Stratton.
Here.
Okay. You received in your packets the minutes of the August 8th meeting. Are there any corrections or additions needed to the minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Remack to approve the minutes of the August 8th meeting. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Singer. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then the minutes have been approved. We have 2 items on the consent agenda tonight, and these are items that are considered routine and non-controversial in nature that do not warrant a full staff presentation and board discussion. So I will read the 2 items together, and then if there's any member of the public or member of the Planning Commission would like a full staff presentation, we will do so and take them separately. The first item is an application for the first revision of the Garner Commercial Subdivisions, lots 1 and 3, submitted by Bob Farley on behalf of property owner Cada LLC. The request to revise the lot line between Lot 1 and Lot 3. The 10.28 plus or minus subject property is zone M1 and is located at the end of State Line Road, east of Yahweh Drive, and on the south side of Highway 178, known as 6860 State Line Road East. The second consent agenda item is an application to vacate a portion .28 plus or minus acres of Lot 8 of Wisewood Subdivision, Section B, submitted by Robbie Jones, Davis and Associates, Inc., on behalf of property owner Bonnie Wiseman. The subject property is zone R2, Single Family Residential District, and is located at the end of Wiseman Drive on the south side of the road. All right, is there any member of the public or Planning Commission would like a full staff presentation at this time of either of the items? If not, we need a motion to approve the consent agenda items 1 and 2.
I make a motion to accept the consent agenda items 1 and 2.
All right, we have the motion by Ms. Singer to accept the consent agenda items. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Stratton. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then the consent agenda items are approved. All right, under old business, we have an application for project text and development plan for Robinson Crossing Commerce Center Plan Commercial Development, submitted by Stephen Steinbach, Urban Insights LLC, on behalf of Barry Bridgeforth R.R. Ayers, property owner. The purpose is to establish the Robinson Crossing Commerce Center, a 92 plus or minus acre commercial development. The subject property is zoned C4 Planned Commercial District and is located at the northeast corner of Pleasant Hill and Church Road. We'll have the staff presentation at this time.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you may remember, this property is located at Church and Pleasant Hill Road. The Robinson Crossing Commercial Center planned development is consisting of 92 acres. This proposal seeks to create a variety of commercial land use opportunities, including retail, special purpose commercial, services and financial, hospitality, and also a gas station to be located at the corner of Church Road and Pleasant Hill. If you will remember from our last meeting, the recommendation was to table the application by the Planning Commission. The applicant has made significant material changes, and we will go through those. Again, to refresh your memory, a little bit of historical overview. This was initially part of the Marguerite Manor planned unit development in 06, was extracted from that, and in 2019 it was rezoned to C4 commercial. The property is currently vacant. As noted, the subject property's entire perimeter maintains public road frontage. Church Road's on the south, Pleasant Hill is on the west, Latham Drive is on the north, Sandage Road is on the east. Existing and proposed land uses around the subject property include Marguerite Manor, which is residential and neighborhood commercial. It's to the south. Fixed mixed-use Robinson Crossing and the neighborhood at Bell Point, PUDs to the west. There is a vacant companion track to the north, currently zoned AR. And to the east, you've got a large commercial storage facility, utility, and waste disposal land. So we had talked about the different uses, and here they are, again, refreshing your memory. We've got the north side, which is general commercial, as you can see. Your center part, which is going to be your business intensive shopping center, and along Church Road is your highway commercial out parcels. We had previously stated that there is a gas station that is intended to go on the corner. So we've got essentially areas here which are broke up into phasing. The property is envisioned to be developed into 3 phases. Phase 1 includes the intended gas station area at Church and Pleasant Hill. I've got the pointer here at that intersection. Phase 2 includes potential out parcels fronting Church and Latham Drive. And then, of course, Phase 3, which would be your middle commercial intensive area. The preliminary subdivision plats would be required in the development phase of each phase to ensure that the provision of sufficient subdivision infrastructure will be provided on potential lots. And then, so we had talked to the Planning Commission last time about paring down some of these recommendations that we would have for consideration. So some additional language was added by Mr. Steinbach. The additional language based on staff recommendation that was added to the plan that's before you is that each phase shall be planned in a manner that failure to proceed to the subsequent phase will not have adverse impact on the development of surroundings at any stage of the development. This includes, but not necessarily limited to, maintaining vehicular and pedestrian access between the phases. Connecting an internal drive to Latham Road that will provide access to a full median opening on Pleasant Hill and ensure that utilities are adequately sized and extended with anticipation of future development. So going back over that just a little bit, we talked about that connecting an internal drive to Latham Road. As we get in to a couple of slides, we'll talk about traffic conditions. This is laid out now with the median overlaid. So a access to get out of phase 1 will be having to go north on Latham Drive to use the access onto Pleasant Hill. And again, we'll talk just a little bit more about that in our traffic phase. We looked at again, the analysis last time. We talked about the proposed uses contained in section 7.0 of the project text generally align with the uses permitted in C2 and C3 highway commercial and the general commercial districts respectively in the zoning ordinances. So would it affect the character of the community in light of quality construction? Added language was found in the text that did notate that that any buildings would generally align with the opposite single-family housing that would be composed of brick and adequate structures. Again, in addition, we talked about signs the last time. Pole signs would not be permitted. So in this regard, it's necessary to note that the building facades and utilities all match the surrounding construction. So utilities would be underground, and then the buildings would be predominantly brick. Any roof-mounted or ground-mounted utility equipment would be shedded from public view. and equipment will be painted in earth tones such as green to match the vegetation. So these align with our design review ordinances, and they make sure that the approval conditions are intended to emphasize a character of matching quality. So we talked about the traffic conditions. I want to bring this back up about again, the entire property is surrounded by 4 public roads, and Pleasant Hill to the west is under government redesign as a median boulevard with restriction points and directional access. As we look at our next slide, we will see that there's going to be a note that's going to have to be added to the preliminary plat that has to do with some directional traffic as it comes in off of Pleasant Hill. So the proposed access and circulation plan, again, does not include any construction of public streets, and the entire site will be interconnected by crossed access and private drives. So here's some additional language that we will need on the preliminary and final plat as it is submitted. We will need a note that actually delineates that the northeast or the northmost Pleasant Hill Drive is going to be a left in, a right out, and a right out. It's a directional median per our plan. We'll need this noted here on the plan to make sure that any future development abides by that. We'll also need to make sure that the configuration of the lot and the C-store is based on the right-of-way line for Pleasant Hill Road as depicted here in this illustration. You will note that the developer was able to remove the westernmost driveway, so we have this now down to 5 exit points onto Church Road, and that's why, as I spoke about earlier, it's important that we make sure that this access going north to Latham Drive is put in during the first phase. So again, just want to reiterate here, I think it's just an important point because we need this note on here that we have up here in the left-hand corner for your reading that Pleasant Hill is under government redesign and will be a median boulevard. The applicant has made significant material changes, including but not limited to access to the site. We talked about Pleasant Hill, dedication of right-of-way, installation of curb, gutters, and sidewalks. Also within the plan, there's an incorporation of a future traffic study based on the size of the store that's going in on phase 3. They also noted some of our concerns from our comments and conditions within the updated text. One of those was the uses within Area 1 and 2, delineating that the auto repair and C-stores with gas would be taken away from the Area 2 and also Area 1. Architectural language was updated, and then conditions from Director Gambone per an email on 8/24/23. So we talked about the boulevard. I want to bring back your attention this engineering drawing. I think it's important to see it to an actual scale. I think that at this time, Byron Houston is working with staff engineers, making sure that these are being abided by as we go in to actually place a building. We talked about government redesign. The city's going to need additional right-of-way that's going to extend into the subject property along Pleasant Hill to enable this design. Church Road is a 5-lane road with a middle turn lane. Improvements may be needed along Sandage Road to provide sufficient capacity and access for the proposed developments. So Area 3, that pushes us up towards Latham Drive. It's a narrow 2-lane road. It's not designed for commercial or low-intensity industrial developments. Those will need to be looked at further with staff engineers. The developments of the lot fronting that road will require the street to be widened. So again, what we're talking about here is along Latham Drive, as you see my mouse running west to east and east to west. The wording has been added to the project text that upon submission of a preliminary plat, in which is being proposed that the intent to develop this single retail building or multiple retail buildings of 50,000 square feet or more, the applicant shall submit a traffic impact analysis to include an anticipated development program for the full project build-out of all phases. This assesses the need for improvements such as road widening and installation of medians, deceleration lanes, or traffic signals. And then based on this traffic study, preliminary and final plat approvals may be conditioned on the completion of improvements. So the development of lots fronting this road will require that the street be widened to provide at least a middle turn lane, and the proposed access and circulation plan does not include the construction of any new public roads or streets. Reiterating what we spoke about last time, they have met the city standards for roadway access, parking, and circulation. When we're looking at widths, we're looking at landscape and screening. Staff does feel like these minimums have been met. I will note that on Exhibit G, it does say that the sidewalks may be required. So that is something that we need to look at, as we did talk about that. That is in the project text that, that we need to make sure that we hold firm on our understanding that sidewalks and curbs and gutters are within this project text. So looking at a few more analysis pieces here, public utility facilities. As we have stated before in our last meeting, this city sewer line does run through the middle. Public water and gas and sewer, they're all currently available. And then, any and all utility improvements shall be made by the developer and designed to the standards acceptable to the city of Olive Branch. All utility lines shall be installed underground. Lastly, we looked at other such matters pertaining to public health, safety, and general welfare. Most notably, we looked at these detention areas. We didn't find any potential hazard uses that could potentially pose a significant injury to public health. So they did meet that requirement also. And then looking further, so our next steps, following the recommendation of the Planning Commission, this application shall be forwarded to the Board of Aldermen that shall hold a public hearing and make final approval decision. Preliminary plats must be submitted by the property owner and developer for the development of lots in each phase, recommended by the Planning Commission and approved by the Board of Aldermen. Final plats must be approved before building permits may be issued. So our recommendation is based on the finding of the planned commercial development standards that they've been met. We approve the application and recommend that the Board of Aldermen approve the project text and preliminary development plan for the Robinson Crossing Commercial Center planned commercial development, subject to the applicant revising and resubmitting the project text and preliminary development plan to address conditions 1, 2, and 3 by September 29th, 2023. So we did look at the 21 conditions we had on the last meeting in which we tabled. We were able to work with Mr. Steinbach and pare these down to 8 issues. Of which I think that we noted during the presentation that we would look at eliminating the motor vehicle service repair as a use in area 1 and 2. They did meet the condition of removing the gas station with fuel pumps in Area 2 already in the plan text. As noted last time by a commission member, there was talk about the gas pump canopies being located in the back of the building. Revised master plan must be revised reflecting these plans and submitted to the city staff of Olive Branch before this application can be considered. And then another one I want to bring to your attention would be number 3, as it must be met. It revised the note on the master plan. As we talked about, there would need to be a note added to that northernmost Pleasant Hill egress drive, and that would be a left in, right out, right in as the directional median per the plans. And that will conclude my presentation for the staff.
Thank you. Any questions of staff?
I have a question. On your recommendation on 2, you have the gas pump canopy and all gas pumps shall be located at the back of the building. What was the rationale for that? Because right across the street on Church, there's gas pumps, very visible to Church Road.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So we came up with that as it was brought to our attention during the last meeting. There was debate held over where that canopy would be located. That talk was before the motion was carried, and after reviewing the last YouTube video, we found it to be something that was discussed by the Planning Commission and within the motion that was made.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
I had a question for staff. We passed an ordinance not that long ago that all gas stations have to get conditional use permits, and there were certain specifications that they had to meet for that conditional use permit, one of them being that they have to be catty-corner from each other, correct?
I'm not familiar with that, sir.
With that ordinance?
No, sir, it did not specify that they have to be catty
Across.
corner.
Okay, got it.
It just, there were 3 conditions. It has to be at a traffic light. If it's a 4-way stop, if it's a 4-way light,
Yeah.
then you can only have maximum 2.
Okay,
If it's T, then you can only have maximum 1.
gotcha,
And then you need a conditional use permit.
gotcha. Would this fall under that conditional use permit requirement? I know it
The-
meets everything, but would they still have to get one?
The way the ordinance was written specified that for planned developments, it will not require a conditional use permit, except the Planning Commission and the Board of Aldermen, but especially the Board of
Gotcha.
Aldermen, desires that it should be a conditional use permit. The reason being, generally, the conditions, the review that the Board of Zoning Adjustment makes and imposes certain conditions to a use in granting a conditional use permit is the same review that you are making at the time of approving this project text. So we will basically be duplicating the same process
Gotcha.
if we want to go back in front of the Board of Zoning Adjustment for a conditional use permit. If you feel that there are certain conditions that should be applied to a gas station in the approval of a project text, then you can make those conditions during the approval of the project text itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, we'll now open the public hearing. Is someone here wishes to represent the application?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Steve Steinbach, Urban Insight, 7825 Tumbly Creek Drive, Millington, Tennessee. Happy to be with you this evening. Also attending are the applicant, Barry Bridgeforth, and representatives of RAND Management, the prospective end user for the hard corner. I'll dispense with a lengthy presentation with regard to an overview. I think it was fully vetted at last month's meeting with regard to the nature of the proposed development, what it is, what it isn't, the applicant's intentions. I'm happy to report that since last month's meeting, we have met with staff, and we're appreciative, Jeremiah, Mr. Gambone, working through consolidating what was 21 conditions into 6 conditions. I think the focus of the Planning Commission at that time was more specificity with regard to what the impact exactly of the future proposed Pleasant Hill Road right-of-way would be. I think I argued at the time we were dealing with a zoning application, not necessarily a preliminary site plan. I still maintain that the level of scrutiny required has put us in a position where the subsequent preliminary site plan will hopefully have already been thoroughly reviewed and looked at. That is reflected in your updated plan. And so, as we discussed last time, there wasn't what I would describe as a material change. Yes, there was an impact, and we're going to have to relocate a minor drainage lateral in the course of developing the site, which is just part of it. But in terms of the area sizes, they're pretty much the same. So with that, I'll say that we are in accord with the recommended conditions, with the exception of condition 2, and we want to discuss that from a variety of vantage points. First, I would say that in this particular instance, and I'm not here to debate with you what I believe to be a subjective aesthetic consideration. It's interesting to me as a planner when we talk about these changes that the idea is to improve the aesthetic presentation to the general public. I remember when new urbanism first came out, and the rage was moving retail buildings up to the street and putting parking behind. And it's interesting to me when there's a clash between these aesthetic sensibilities, I'll describe them, and pragmatic concerns, because the reality is most end users and patrons desire to park in front of commercial establishment for safety concerns. In this particular instance, and I know the precedent has been set, I believe in an Oak Park PD and some other planned developments where there's not established urban development, the Planning Commission has approved to require those canopies. Here we're dealing with a different situation. We have an existing gas station developed, I believe, by Commissioner Singh. There's a competitive disadvantage. And although the subject property was in fact extracted formally from the Marguerite Manor PD, it still very much shares the fabric of that development, right? So the conditions that are applicable to the current Marguerite Manor on the south side have a symbiotic relationship, even though we're upping the ante, if you will, and we recognize that's the price of admission. The neighborhood at Bell Point, the other large mixed-use commercial plan development on the west side of Pleasant Hill, again, is not burdened with this condition. So it affects the character, if you will, or would affect the character very much so with regard to having one station with the canopy behind the principal structure and the other gas stations not burdened with that same requirement. Again, we believe that's a significant difference here in that the other 4 corners of this intersection are already entitled with existing plan developments that do not require that type of consideration. The other consideration is simply the impact in and of itself of Pleasant Hill Road. We're talking about increasing the rights-of-way by almost 30 feet from what was previously planned, a medium that precludes left-hand turn movements along the entire frontage of this property. The result is right in, right out on the Pleasant Hill side, patrons confused with regard to internal circulation Everybody coming in off the Church Road, if you're coming in off the Pleasant Hill Road and the canopy is located behind the principal structure, accessibility, circulation, I believe would be problematic. I'm not going to get into some of the more abstract concerns. I know you considered a contentious convenience store with gas sales on College. That was a primarily residential area. I'm sure you had your reasons, but I didn't recall canopy being required behind the principal structure, though one could make the argument in that primarily residential area it could be appropriate. Safety concerns, the setbacks for canopies are different than the principal structure as I understand it. There's a 50-foot requirement for the principal structure, less so for the canopy. So if we're moving the principal structure up to the setback line, we're shifting those burdens, and it places a larger burden on this particular property. So again, while I'm very pleased that staff has worked with myself and the applicant to pare these down to what we believe is a project text that covers the gamut, make sure that the parameters are established. We did eliminate the westernmost curb cut. Admittedly, that would have caused some traffic concerns. The end user has agreed to that. It works. It can work. But the canopy behind the gas station, for the reasons that I identified, is problematic for us. And I would respectfully ask that you consider that in your motion to recommend approval to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. Again, in attendance with me are representatives of the C-Store. Their professional engineer, Byron Houston, is here, who can answer any specific questions with regard to that particular issue and the impact on the construction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions of the applicant? Mr. Singh has a question, please.
Steve, number one, Stephen, I wanted to say thank you for revising all this stuff. It's a lot more showing that right away and everything like that gives us a better picture of how things are going to lay out there. Ram Management is building a store a couple of miles down the street from this site in South Haven, aren't they, at Church and Getwell as well? I'm asking. Yes. You guys are, right? Okay. At that site, do you guys have your canopies placed in front or in back of that building there?
I think they're in the front. We have several projects. I need to take a look at that one to be absolutely sure about that.
Sure. Yeah, they're in the back. Same as we're requesting them to be laid out here. But is there any reason that they were laid out in the back on that project?
Mr. Chairman, it may be appropriate for the applicant to come speak at the
Yes.
podium and
Yes.
state their name.
Yes, please come forward. Yes, sir. Thank you.
I'm not very familiar with that project. I'm not the engineer. of
Please,
that project.
please state your name for
Okay, I'm
the, and
sorry.
address. for the
Byron
record.
Houston, Houston Engineering, P.O. Box 3087, Oxford, Mississippi, 38655.
And your name, sir.
Dwight Barker, Rand Management, 5195 Summerwin Lane, Arlington.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, my question was, for that property that you guys are building there, all the things that Mr. Stephen Steinbach laid out, the burden for the architecture and the traffic circulation and the safety and the problematic, I was just wondering, did they apply there as well as to what he's presenting that they would apply here?
I'm not sure, isn't that in the city of South Haven?
That is in the city of South
Yeah,
Haven, yeah.
they may have had some requirements for that particular development. It could have been totally different set of circumstances that required that, and if I'd known, I would have become familiar with the project.
Sure. Well, the site is about 2 miles away from this one, and it faces identical traffic flows. Actually, Getwell is a lot more traffic than Pleasant Hill, so that's why I'm kind of conflicted as to, like, it worked there and there was no issues there. I mean, you guys can kind of see my point here as well, right? Where it's okay a mile and a half down the street there, but it's not okay over here. Whereas that actual project is also part of a bigger development as well. It's a 15-acre parcel, I believe, and that the C-store is the corner anchor for something like that. Very similar to this, developing a 92-acre site. It's very, very similar. This one is actually a lot bigger than that site. So.
They may have had a little more control over how it was accessed from the back, and it may have been some different, ideas with access on the main road, and those go into it also. But my experience, there's some areas that do require the canopies to be on the side or the back, and also one thing that my client advised me of, that he has several stores, he has some stores like that, and it seems that women and some of the older people are reluctant to stop into some of these stores because they like to be open and be seen from the highway, and particular things like that. And that's one of the main reasons why he would like to keep the canopies in the front, to where the patrolmen, they patrol the roads mostly. I mean, they do patrol in, the inner developments of some of these commercial areas, but that, and then, drivers driving down the road see something happening, they are able to maybe render aid to somebody that's having a little trouble.
Question I have for staff. I know we have a PD for the intersection back east from this one as well at Craft and Church, correct? There's a project there as well that has a gas station approved there for that corner as well, right?
Yes, sir.
Was there anything in that, any language in that PD to put the pumps behind the building, to locate them behind the building, or is it, there's nothing?
No, that particular PD did not have that requirement, but there was a reason for it.
Okay,
Directly behind that side is Leak Creek.
gotcha.
And the last thing you want to do, and then you have a floodplain. So we did not want a situation where you have gas tanks in a floodplain area. That is the reason it was not included in the project. That requirement was not included.
Gotcha.
But on Ross, if you continue to the east,
Yep.
Ross and Church, that PD also included a gas station, and it had sufficient area where you could put tanks and the canopy outside of the floodplain. For that particular PD, the canopy is at the back.
It is on that, okay.
Okay.
The location of the canopies, is that something going forward that the planning department will prioritize in PDs, or is it just situational?
The planning commission is aware we're working on zoning code updates now. If that is something which the planning commission wants to include as a standard requirement in the zoning ordinance for gas stations, under certain circumstances, I think from a planning perspective, if it adjoins residential, you certainly don't want the pumps, to be facing the residential houses. So if that is something that the planning commission want to consider adding as one of the conditions, just as you have the stoplights conditions and the rest, if you want to add that to the code, then that can be added down the line. But in this particular case, you are dealing with a PD text. It's up to the planning commission and the board of aldermen whatever conditions you want to add to the development.
Yeah, no, my main hangup is just that, I mean, we have the same developer, same size site, same type of development 2 miles to the west, and it's not an issue there. I mean, they've invested millions of dollars there, according to that, and the city of South Haven required it for whatever reason. Going forward, I actually think the city of South Haven is mandating those to be located on the back of the buildings. Sure. I could see these issues being a thing if this was the only store on Church Road from one end to the other that had the pumps in the back. Yeah, okay, that doesn't look right. I 1000% agree with you on that. But it's just really hard when we have the exact same project a mile and a half down the road in a different municipality, same developer, same product, same everything, same investment size, same everything. And it's an issue here, but it wasn't an issue there. So.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, Commissioner Singh, again, as I noted during the initial discussion, it's hard to debate
Sure.
the aesthetic basis. It's a subjective call. I've seen gas stations with the canopies behind the store in developments. They can look attractive, and I'm not here to debate that. And I'm not here to debate which looks better. Traditionally, the canopies in the front of the store. Again, I think the primary thing from my vantage point as a planning consultant is the existing entitled PDs, of which this was a part. I want to be clear on that. Even though it was extracted, it was a part, and that requirement was not levied on the property at that time. So it's again, I do believe it is a competitive disadvantage, because faced with the choice, I think most users would prefer to have their gas pumps out. We have a considerable, ample, generous buffer around. This is a hard corner site. Because it's a hard corner site, it's exposed on two sides. It has two front yards, if you will. So putting it in the back, it's visible. So I could agree that canopies behind a station could make sense if that is the edict, if you will, the belief, the planning philosophy of the community. But the conversation that just occurred between Commissioner Singh and staff, I believe wholeheartedly, when you're making a paradigm shift like that from a design mandate, I think you got to give you should give due notice to the development community, and then incorporate it within your planning documents, your design guideline manuals, your site plan regulations, to have it come up every time you've got a planned development is problematic, at least from my vantage point. So again, we understand your position, and it's hard for me to answer, well, it's 2 miles down the road. Why is it problematic here? Again, I think Pleasant Hill is a big part of that, notwithstanding the other reasons that I described. It is impactful. It is precluding left-hand turns, and it is going to impact internal circulation. But again, to have it thrown in, and I say thrown in because it wasn't an initial staff recommendation as part of the first go-around. So again, we would respectfully ask in this instance that you consider amending that condition and removing that as a condition of approval. Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone else have any other questions? Thank you for your comments and your insight. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll open a public discussion here. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak in favor of the application? Is there anyone here that wishes to speak in opposition of this application? If not, then public discussion is closed. I'll just kind of open it up for discussion amongst the commissioners.
Thank you.
Any
I'm ready
comments?
to make a motion. Having heard much discussion about the gas pump canopies, I am going to make a motion that we approve this application onto the Board of Aldermen, with the exception of gas pump canopy, and all gas pumps shall be located at the back of the building. I don't agree that is should be a stipulation or a condition of my motion. All other motions I do agree with.
Okay, then we have a motion by Ms. Remack to approve the application and remove item number 2. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes,
Of the
thank you.
gas pump canopy, and all the other conditions remain the same. So we have a motion made there by Ms. Remack. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a second by Ms. Singer. Any other discussion that we need to have? If not, then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
And then we had one opposed on this. So the motion carries, and we'll go to the City Board of Aldermen and Mayor. Thank you so much. Okay, our second item in the old business. Okay, we have an application for the final plat for the neighborhood at Bell Point, Section B, submitted by Joe Frank Lauderdale on behalf of property owners Whitten Heirs LLC. The request is to divide 23.77 plus or minus acres into 25 residential lots and one common open space. The subject property is zoned PUD Plan Unit Development and is located north of Summer Point Drive, east of East Point Drive, and will connect the two sections of Malone Road to the north and the south. And now, staff presentation.
Sir, you may recall, this is an item that you heard at last month's meeting and passed a motion to table the item to this month. Our subject property is just under 24 acres, and you can see it is located in the neighborhood at Bell Point, PUD that was approved back in 2004. You can see this is Pleasant Hill Road, and this is Church Road. This is the property we were just speaking about under the last item there, and we're located about a mile over to the west of that. The preliminary plat for sections A and B of this subdivision was approved back in 2021, and the final plat for section A was approved also in 2021 and recorded in that year as well. And section A is to the south of where section B is. And so you can see on this map that section B will complete this segment of Malone Road that will connect between Church Road and this is Nail Road. And so by adding this additional section B in, we'll be completing that roadway network. That also has a traffic circle in it to calm the traffic to ensure Malone Road doesn't become like Pleasant Hill or carry as much traffic. And back in section A, we had another traffic circle here at Spring Point Drive. This shows you the close-up of the section A, and section B is to the north of it, and this is the plat for section B. A couple things to note on it. You have an 8-foot wide trail system that runs along the east side of the roadway. This is the beginning of the city's, hopefully what will become a large trail network in the city. This would be the western most section of that. We're right near the city's western boundary. And that trail is expected to, or would continue all the way up along the east side through the section B. And then there's plans in the future to possibly take that trail over to the east and head back toward the center of town. And we do have an easement that's proposed as part of this plat that would allow for that trail to be extension to eventually be put in there. We also have the roads that are coming off of the east side of this project are curb, gutter, and sidewalk. All of the development that's over here on the west side has all been open swale, no sidewalks, and so that will change as we move over into the east side of the project. So both of the roads that cut in here, this is Summer Point Drive and Winter Point Drive, would have the curb, gutter, and sidewalk similar to the road Spring Point Drive that's located here on the south side. So you may recall at the last meeting, the reason we tabled the item was we had 3 different issues with it. 2 of those have been addressed. The area where that trail is supposed to cut over, you may recall that in that easement, it's a 40-foot wide landscape buffer that's between this and South Manor Estates that's located to the north. It's a PD requirement back from the 2004 PD. So we have received plans from the applicant to replant that area. And also in that traffic circle, we did not have a plan at the last meeting to be able to, to plant the requirements of the various plants inside that traffic circle. So those have both been provided, and they're depicted on this overhead slide. The one issue we still don't have addressed are the 2 stormwater retention ponds that we discussed last month that are still shown over top of the lots. And in this packet, you received a memorandum from the city engineer basically stating that he wanted to see those retention ponds remain on the property. There had been some discussion that they would possibly be converted into dry ponds or dry detention ponds. The memorandum that you received from the city engineer requested that they have what's called stage detention, which would basically be a way to detain smaller storm events. There have been some issues with some flooding downstream of both of these ponds, and so they're there to help provide, to detain stormwater in them. So, it would hold up in those ponds rather than flowing straight downstream further. And I showed you this slide last time. This is the one on the north side. They had showed on the plat 40-foot drainage easements, and you can see how I had made the point last time, if you were the owner of lot 25 and you were responsible to maintain back here, you'd really have no way to access it other than cutting across your neighbor's property to go back here to be able to get that area, or to cut across your neighbor's property this way to get back there. This is a depiction of the second pond that's a little bit farther to the south. This one drains out in this particular area. This resident here has experienced some problems with flooding with the pool there. So again, this likely is going to have to be redesigned to put these detention ponds in common open spaces rather than parts of lot. So you might see a redesign that would maybe have a common open space over here, maybe an L shape that would bring you back out to the right of way, and then you could expand possibly this lot 18. But as it stands right now, we do not have a preliminary plat that would meet these requirements. So we have a recommended motion again to table the application until such time the applicant would address these conditions number 1 and 2, and a resubmittal. Number 1 is basically dealing with the redesign of the stormwater retention ponds per the city engineer's September 6th memorandum that was in your packet. And some of that memorandum hit on some of the areas that are talked about, issues talked about under number 2, but basically this is talking about putting these into common open spaces. It may require losing a lot, or maybe possibly 2 lots on the redesign. So that concludes the staff presentation. I have spoken to the applicant, Mr. Lauderdale, about that, and he's aware that this would be tabled and understands that he does need to make this resubmittal and square everything away with the city engineer before it comes back to us.
Okay. Any questions of staff? If not, I think at this point we can make the motion to table the application if we wish to do so. So do we have a motion to table? Motion to table. All right, we have a motion by Mr. Stratton to table the application. Do we have a second? Okay, second by Ms. Remack. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then we will table this until the next meeting.
It may be a future meeting in the event they don't get that resubmittal to us, so it would be open-ended.
Okay, now we're to the new business. Application for a preliminary plat for scope subdivision submitted by Chad Fisher, Focal Point Investments, property owner. The request is to subdivide 15.89 plus or minus acres into 3 lots. The subject property is on M1 Light Industrial District and located on the northwest side of Old Craft Road and the southwest side of Highway 178, known as 8690 and 8700 Old Craft Road. And then we'll have the staff presentation.
Yes, sir. As you noted in the application, our subject property is just under 16 acres in size, and we're located along the northwest side of Old Craft Road, which runs here, and the southwest side of Old Highway 178, located here. The property, as you can see on this aerial map, has been cleared and partially excavated, and it's currently comprised of 2 unplatted tax parcels. The majority of the property is on a 14.5 acre parcel, and then there's a 1.5 acre cutout right here, and that line would disappear upon the replatting of the property. You may recall this property, it was rezoned from C2 and AR to the M1 light industrial zoning category back on September 21st of 2021. And what you have before you is an application to subdivide the property into 3 lots as shown on your drawing. I believe that the applicant is planning to follow up this preliminary plat application with the final plat application that would only include Lot 1, which is 6.256 acres shown here. And one important point to note here is that Lot 1 does not have frontage on Old Craft Road facility that runs here. This shows you the initial plat that was submitted with your packet that went out to you in the report, and you can see there's a couple of issues with this plat, and this shows you in yellow highlighted Old Craft Road, and you can see how it runs This is the existing Old Craft Road, which is pictured here. It's a 20-foot wide pavement section, and it runs through and splices the southeast corner of the property and what would be this lots 2 and 3 located here. This is the existing access drive, which is shown here on the plat. So the picture is taken looking north, from that point, looking up in this direction. And obviously that 20-foot wide paved section would be a problem with any type of industrial development because it's simply not wide enough to accommodate truck traffic that would be associated with development of that property. And then shown in this blue area is a 100-foot wide TVA easement. So walking into the property this way, taking a picture, looking at that TVA easement, you can see this picture. You can see there's some overhead utility lines that are located there. So the initial submittal, again, shown on the left, and when the applicant received the staff report, they did make a revised submittal, which you did not have as part of your packet, and it's shown here on the overhead slide. Again, one of the main points on the initial submittal and what's shown in your staff report is that Old Craft Road right-of-way was not shown on the initial submittal, and you can see on the revised submittal in this dark gray area, they are showing where the Old Craft Road right-of-way would go. And then also we didn't have any type of cross-section shown on the preliminary plat for what the road would actually look like, how wide the right-of-way would be, and what the road would look like, the expanded roadway would look like, and that's been corrected on the revised submittal, and this is a cutout of that cross-section. So you can see here to here is the existing 20-foot wide road section, and there's a proposal to add basically 14 feet on each side of it. It would create basically a 48-foot wide right-of-way from back of curb to back of curb within a 68-foot wide right-of-way. And where that came from is through collaboration with our city engineer, Mr. Swims, and we took a look over here at Industrial Drive that's located, our subject properties to the north off of this slide, and this is Old Craft Road, and you can see that Industrial Drive has a 68-foot wide right-of-way and a 48-foot wide pavement section, and you can see it was timely, I suppose, when this aerial map was taken. You can see a picture of a truck there, and that's why those roads have to be wider to accommodate truck turning movements. So the recommended motion that you had in your packet was to table the item because we didn't have those items of the right-of-way and the cross-section shown in there. That has been corrected and submitted, which is shown on your slide. So we do have a revised recommended motion to the recommend that the Board of Aldermen would approve the preliminary plat application to subdivide the 15.89 acres into industrial lots subject to the conditions as noted. Now, condition number 1 talks about revising this preliminary plat drawing to make the remainder piece of land on the east side of the Old Craft Road right-of-way either lot 4 or right-of-way, and that's this area shown, this triangular area shown in red. It's not depicted as anything. I'm not sure how usable it is. It doesn't have much area in it, but you have a TVA, the 100-foot wide TVA easement running through it. But it really can't just be there as labeled as nothing. It either needs to be a lot or a common open space or part of the right-of-way. So whichever one the applicant would choose to put that in would be okay, I think. That could be something that could always change at the point that this would go to a final plat drawing, and that's not the case now. And I did want to mention again that we will see a follow-up situation in terms of the next application that's submitted. I think you'll see this next month. Our applicant in this case is in a very big hurry on this particular project, and so they plan to come back with a follow-up application that would be just a final plat for Lot 1, and that does not have any frontage on Old Craft Road. I believe they plan to develop that and have access only to Old Highway 178. So I would just take note again of the revised recommended motion would be to approve in this case as opposed to table. I believe Mr. Kyle Ham is here representing the developer as well, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions of staff? If not, if there's someone here to represent the application, please come forward.
Yes, I'm Kyle Ham with Signal Source, 8888 Mid-South Drive, Olive Branch, Mississippi. So I'll be glad to answer any questions. We agree with all the conditions put forth by staff.
Okay, any questions? No questions, you, thank
Thank
you,
you.
sir.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone here that wishes to speak in favor of the application? Is there anyone present that wishes to speak against the application? If not, then public discussion is closed, and I will now open it up to the commissioners for any discussion or motions on the matter.
I make a motion that we approve the application subject to the following 6 conditions.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Remack that we approve the application subject to the 6 staff conditions. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second by Mr. Singh. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And it's unanimous and the motion is carried. And the application has been approved. All right, item number 2 is an application for a final plat for Acre Commercial Subdivision, Acre Commercial Development Subdivision, Phase 2, submitted by Harvey Matheny, the Pickering firm, on behalf of David and Sons Properties LLC, property owner. The request is to create 3 commercial lots and 1 COS from 4.93 plus or minus acres. The subject property is zoned C4, Planned Commercial District, and is located at the southwest corner of Highway 302 and Craft Road.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you is a request to consider the final plat for Phase 2 of the Acre Commercial Subdivision. This is a piece of property that is located south of Goodman Road or Highway 302 and west of Craft Road. Phase 1 includes these 2 lots. One of the lots to the south of James Herbert Drive is currently under construction for a La Quinta Hotel. Phase 2 is the next area to the west of Phase 1. The request before you, kind of give you a background, is to consider the final plat approval for Phase 2. So Phase 1 has Lot 1, Lot 2. There is a stormwater management detention basin at this particular location. And Phase 2 will consist of these 3 lots. Phase 2, Lot 1, Phase 2, Lot 2, Phase 2, Lot 3 to the south. A new street, James Herbert Drive, will be extended, or the plat includes the dedication of a section of James Herbert Drive to the west and a new street extending from James Herbert Drive and connecting onto Goodman Road to the north. The preliminary plat for this Phase 2, which is shown here, was approved by the Board of Aldermen following your recommendation on May 16, 2023. Subdivision infrastructure, that includes things like water line, sewer, gas, the construction of these streets. Those subdivision infrastructure plans have been approved by the city engineer. However, Phase 2 infrastructure has not yet been constructed. Water lines have not been laid. Sewer lines have not been laid. The roads have not been constructed. As shown, all these road areas have not been constructed. Street lights have not been installed. So this is a bit of an unconventional way of going about a subdivision process. The standard process is when the preliminary plat is approved, the applicant submits construction plans. When those are approved administratively by the city engineer, the developer goes out and lay the minimum infrastructure, subdivision infrastructure on the ground, and then submits a final plat for approval. And there are reasons for going through that process, why you want to first have the construction, the subdivision infrastructure on the ground before you have a final plat. Doing that enables the city to know actually what it's accepting in terms of dedication. Like in this particular case, The city, if this final plat is approved and recorded, from the moment it's recorded, the streets shown on it become public streets. But those will be basically paper streets. They are not yet constructed, they don't exist on the ground, they just exist on a piece of paper. The formal route or the standard procedure allows the city to know exactly what already exists on the ground before it accepts any offer of dedication. The second reason for that is maintenance responsibility. Once right-of-ways are dedicated on subdivision plats, strictly speaking from a legal perspective, it becomes the responsibility of the city to maintain the areas that are shown on those right-of-ways. So if you have a situation where a right-of-way has been dedicated to the city but it has not been constructed, then it creates a problem in terms of who goes there and mows that particular area that has been dedicated to the city. And thirdly, during construction, sometimes contractors, the location of a utility line may not be exactly as it was shown on the construction plans. And final subdivision plats often create utility easements. Those easements are supposed to be created following the exact location of utilities as they have been laid on the ground. If you've not yet laid them on the ground, then it's difficult to know exactly where those easements are going to be. In this particular case, however, the applicant has requested a final plat approval. It follows a bit of an unorthodox line or approval path. The construction plans have been approved. The city engineer appears to be confident that the lines will be laid as shown on the construction plans, and the streets will be constructed as shown on the construction plans. As I did indicate, this is a request for final plat approval. Two things to call attention to. Because the infrastructure, the streets, have not yet been constructed, Lot 1 and Lot 2, however, will front on an existing public road, namely Goodman Road. Lot 3 will not have any road frontage until the day that James Herbert Drive is extended to provide frontage on Lot 3. E911 emergency services for E911 purposes, once we approve a final plat, that gives the developer the right to come in and pull a building permit to start development of any of the lots that are shown on those final plats. If the streets are not yet there, the first lift of asphalt at least laid, and there is an incident on any of those lots, and there is no street access, E911 cannot get to those lots. So it poses a safety risk. For that reason, the approval conditions before you are written such that they take care of these particular situations. Staff recommends approval subject to the initially 6 conditions, but really in this case subject to 5 conditions. The first being that improvements shall be the responsibility of the developer, and those improvements, I will have to need to strengthen this, include maintaining the entirety of the right-of-way until the day that it is actually fully constructed with the final lifts of asphalt. So those improvements shall remain, and maintenance shall be the responsibility of the developer and not the responsibility of the city of Olive Branch. It shall further be the responsibility of the developer to obtain all necessary permits from applicable state of Mississippi departments or any other government agencies for the grading and completion of those improvements. Condition number 3, the developer shall post a letter of credit with the city of Olive Branch of such amount as shall be determined by the city engineer, sufficient to guarantee the completion of all uncompleted public infrastructure. That includes the water lines, sewer lines, streets, street lights, the roads themselves, plus a 25% contingency before the recordation of the final plat. Condition number 4 and number 5 are important in addressing the 2 issues I raised in the last slide. Condition number 4 being that an occupancy certificate shall not be issued for any development on proposed Lot 1 and 2, these 2. So Lot 1 and Lot 2 shall not be issued an occupancy certificate for any development on those lots until the first lift of asphalt has been laid on all streets or street sections included in the subdivision, in the Acre Plan Commercial Development Subdivision Phase 2. With respect to Lot 3, at least for Lot 1 and Lot 2, they will have frontage, they will front on an existing street. For Lot 3, there will be no street whatsoever that it will front on. For that reason, a building permit, not a certificate of occupancy, a building permit, so no construction at all, no building. A building permit shall not be issued for construction on Phase 2, Lot 3, until the first lift of asphalt has been laid on all streets or street sections included in the Acre Planned Commercial Development Subdivision Phase 2. Condition number 6 that was initially included in your packet was that a name needed to be provided for Street A. Street A was this particular street. At the time of preparation of the staff report, there was no name proposed for it. A name has now been proposed, Bethlehem Drive, that has been vetted by 911 and it meets standards for street naming. So that particular condition has been removed. Therefore, staff recommends approval subject to these conditions 1 to 5. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Any questions of staff on this? If there are no questions, is there someone here to represent the application? If you'll please come forward.
Good evening. My name's Harvey Matheny with the Pickering Firm, 6363 Poplar, Suite 300, Memphis, Tennessee, 38119. We do agree with all the conditions of approval. Asong did a good job of outlining the entire project. I can certainly answer any questions if you have any.
Okay. Any questions?
I have a question for
Yes.
you. And it's not pertaining to the lots that we're discussing tonight, and you may not have an answer for me, but are there future plans for the acreage that is, I think that's Hamilton Circle, red light, am I correct, there at Goodman?
Hamilton Circle is on the west side of this overall PD.
I believe
Correct.
it is right here.
That's correct.
Okay. This area here, is this, do you know what's, I'm asking
What the plan
because of
is?
the infrastructure.
Okay. So that area all the way over to Hamilton, to west or South Hamilton Circle is all part of the Acre PD. And so the plan is, in fact, we're working on the next phase now. It would be to extend James Herbert Drive all the way to the west and connect to Hamilton Circle.
That's what I was
And then
wondering.
MDOT has also agreed, they haven't permitted yet, but they've agreed to 3 connections to Goodman Road along this entire frontage of Acre PD. So we're awaiting their permitting any day, hopefully.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Any other questions? No further questions. Thank you
Okay.
so much for your
Thank you.
information. Okay, is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone here that wishes to speak in opposition to this application? If not, then public discussion is closed, and now we'll open it up to the commissioners for any discussion or motions to be brought forward.
Make a motion to approve subject to staff conditions.
Okay, we have,
2 to 5.
okay, we have a,
Second?
we have a motion by Mr. Stratton to approve the application subject to staff conditions, and we have a second by Ms. Remack. Do we have any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then the motion carries and the application is approved. Okay, item number 3 is an application to amend the preliminary plat for the villages at South Branch subdivision, Phase 1, submitted by Henry Porter, W.H. Porter Consultants, PLLC, on behalf of Michelle Terhune, South Branch Development LLC property owner. The request is to add a common open space, COS E504, and surrounding road sections from initially planned Phase 5 to Phase 1. The subject property is zoned R3 Planned Residential District and is located on the east side of Pleasant Hill Road North between Stonecrest Drive and Bram Drive.
Mr. Chairman, Planning Commissioners, before you is a request to consider amending the preliminary plat for the villages at South Branch Phase 1. This is a subdivision, as you did indicate, lying south of Stonecrest. There's a Stonecrest subdivision in this area. And the South Branch subdivision is to the south. You have the Pleasant Hill Public School further to the south in about this area. This is Pleasant Hill Road, and Davidson Road is to the east. The preliminary plat as shown here in this area, consisting of this area, was approved by the Board of Aldermen on April 19, 2022, consisting of over 50 acres. It did include the master plan for this PD. So this area in yellow, marked here in yellow, this is the area of the that constituted Phase 1 of the preliminary plan as was approved in April of last year. It did include a swimming pool in this common open space. So in the construction of Phase 1, the required amenity in the PD is a swimming pool that was to be constructed in this particular common open space, E500. And also you have a trail that was required to be constructed in this particular area as part of Phase 1. The applicant, for two reasons, has thought it necessary to relocate that pool from this particular area to this other common open space, E504. The reasons being that the main axis, the main collector streets, which this subdivision sandwiches Pleasant Hill Road to the west and Davidson Road to the east. The main road that connects these two collector streets is what has been proposed to be named Sipsey Way, which is this street, and as such, it will most likely be the busiest of all the streets in this subdivision. So the developer has thought it necessary to remove the swimming pool away and locate it away from what would be a busy road, so to speak, to this particular common open space. And secondly, in the construction of the subdivision, construction 1 has been done, it was necessary to widen the detention basin, and that widening affected the area that would have otherwise been used for the construction of the pool. As such, it has become necessary to relocate the pool to this area. With that, these common open space and the streets surrounding it are proposed, therefore, to be added, this area marked in red, to be added to Phase 1 of the subdivision. In this regard, the preliminary plat would change from looking like this to basically being this. So you add another common open space, E504, onto Phase 1 of the subdivision. So that's basically the recommendation, the request that is before you for approval. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve this amendment subject to two conditions, namely that improvements shall be the responsibility of the developer, not those of the city, and secondly, all the conditions of approval of the preliminary plat as they were ordered by the Board of Aldermen on April 19, 2022 are maintained. That concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of staff? If there are no questions, do we have someone here to represent the application?
How y'all doing? So it's Henry Porter with W.H. Porter, and it's 6055 Primacy Parkway, Memphis, Tennessee, 30119. So as we're going through the design on this, we just felt like, leaving that pool as it was in that location, as the song had said, was just a really busy road. So if we just moved that thing and tucked it away over on the side, that we kind of get more benefit of that little pocket park. But additionally on that, the amount of water that we got going through the development to that location is about 100 acres. And so we had to basically increase the size of that basin, which is really, really pinching down that pool. And we just didn't feel like, based on the quality of this development, that what we would put back in there would really match with what y'all want here and what we want. Because, I mean, it's kind of the intent to have the best that we can have here. So moving over that other location in that pocket park can open up for us to even provide maybe potentially even more than what we have right now. So.
Any questions for Mr. Porter? I guess no further questions, and thank you so much. All right, anyone here wishes to speak in favor of the application? Is there anyone that wishes to speak against the application? If not, then public discussion is closed, and I will just open it up to commissioners for comments or motions.
I make a motion.
Oh, it sounds like stereo here. Go ahead. Go ahead, Ms. Singer. You go first.
I make a motion to approve, including conditions 1 and 2.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Singer to approve the application subject to the staff conditions 1 and 2. And I think we have the second here by Mr. Singh. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And then the motion carries and the application is approved. And that concludes the applications, and our next order of business is the zoning code update. So, oh, we got one more. I'm sorry. I was trying to get through this thing. Yeah, I haven't had supper yet. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm jumping ahead of myself. That's all right. So, yes, item number 4 is an application for the final plat of the Villages of South Branch Phase 1A submitted by Henry Porter, W.H. Porter Consultants, PLLC, on behalf of Michael Terhune, South Branch Development LLC property owner. The request is to create 47 residential lots and 4 COS from 33.74 plus or minus acres. Subject property is zoned R3 Pran Residential District, located on the east side of Pleasant Hill Road between Stonegrass and Bram Drive.
Mr. Chairman, you might not have been wrong trying to hasten this and move ahead. Because this final plat, you have to make a decision whether you want to recommend it to move forward or you want to table it. And I will explain why. The final plat is for Phase A of the same subdivision that you just acted on in terms of revising, amending the preliminary plat. But this is Phase 1A. So what you have is this, the entire Phase A is this area marked here in red, but the applicant or the developer has decided to kind of split that Phase A into 2 as far as the construction and the dedication of right-of-ways is concerned. Only the area marked here in yellow is being proposed to be included in this final plat as Phase 1A. The site, however, has been graded. All of Phase 1A has been graded, except, of course, this area that you just added in the preliminary plat. That still needs to be graded and constructed. So all of this has been graded. Phase 1A only includes the area in yellow. It will consist of a total of 47 lots. There were 2 lots from the master plan of the entire plan development. This is the master plan as laid out. Those different colors are basically the different types of lots, in quote, that were proposed in the master plan. And Phase 1A will consist of 15 estate lots, which will be a minimum of 20,000 square feet. These are the estate lots in this area in yellow. So there will be a minimum of 20,000 square feet. 2 lots that were included in the master plan, 2 of those estate lots to be eliminated. You know, that area has now been occupied basically by the large detention pond. 8 lots will be mini estate lots, minimum 15,000 square feet. There are these other light yellow lots, designated light yellow to the south in this area. And then there'll be 3 grand manor lots, minimum 12,000 square feet. Those are these lots in these 3 lots right here. And you have 11 manor lots with a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet. There are these other lots in this area. And then lastly, 10 cottage lots are shown here, which will be minimum 8,750 square feet for a total of 47 lots proposed in this final plat. The subdivision infrastructure has been laid on the site. For example, you have, this is a sewer manhole. This is the large detention pond, that detention basin that we talked about. Street lights have been installed, fire hydrants and water lines. This is a gas line, electric lines. All the lots have been provided. Utilities, public utilities have been extended to service all the lots being proposed. I should remark that this area that is being added to the final plat, no lots are proposed to be created adjoining it. So it would only just include the common open space and the street surrounding it. Public infrastructure also include a total of 1.1314 miles of roads are being proposed to be dedicated to the city in this final plat. That's about 8 streets. About 5 of them are new streets that have been constructed in this subdivision of different length and different area. 911 has reviewed the names of those streets and determined that they meet as minimum standards and are appropriate. The street names have already been installed on site. Improvements have also been made along Pleasant Hill Road. Those improvements include a widening of Pleasant Hill Road to include this lane, the construction of curb, gutter, and sidewalks. This ADA ramp here does not meet ADA. It needs to have a detectable warning surface. That still needs to be installed. That will have to be bonded on both sides of this Sipsey Way. In terms of amenities, there are a couple of amenities that were included in the both in the preliminary plat and the PD text for this phase 1 of the project, which have not yet been constructed. One of them being the trail network. There's a kiosk there for this entire subdivision. You have a trail that is supposed to extend from here on to what will be, I think that is Bourbon Creek. I think that's the name of that particular road. At this point in time, it's not necessary to construct that trail because it will basically go to nowhere. Just these 2 lots are being proposed in this particular area. When this street is extended in phase 1B, then that trail will have to be constructed. You also have the monument sign that is required to be constructed at the entrance. That's a subdivision monument sign at the entrance to the subdivision by the developer. That has not been constructed. That is a private infrastructure. It cannot be bonded because it's a private infrastructure. It has to be constructed. You also have, in this front, between Pleasant Hill Road and the property line of these 2 lots, there is a common open space that is supposed to have these trees and this crossbar fence that is supposed to be installed by the developer in this frontage area. That is also private common infrastructure or amenities that have to be installed by the developer. They have not yet been installed. Of course, we did mention the swimming pool that is being moved to common open space E504. That has also not been constructed. Those amenities are private and they have been taken care of in the recommendation before you. Staff recommends approval subject to these 6 conditions. The first condition being that the Board of Aldermen approves the associated proposed preliminary plat amendment for the development. Condition number 4 being that the developer shall submit to the City of Olive Branch a letter of credit of sufficient amount as will be determined by the city engineer plus a 25% contingency for the completion of any and all public improvements. So that does not include the private improvements. The city can only accept letters of credit for public infrastructure required in the land area constitutive of the final plat. That includes the streets being proposed around the new common open space that is being added to this phase 1. Condition number 5, this is important. The developer must construct the wood or vinyl fence 15 feet from the right of way of Pleasant Hill Road, the subdivision monument sign along Pleasant Hill Road, the swimming pool in a common open space 504, extend Braham Drive to this common open space, and complete all street sections and utility lines surrounding this common open space before the 31st house in the subdivision passes final inspection. So you have 47 lots. There's basically about 3/4 of the houses in there are built and occupied. They cannot do that now. It would be useless to go in there and construct a swimming pool when there is nobody, there's no homeowner to be using it or maintaining it. So it's important you first have some homeowners already on the site, and then those can be dedicated to the homeowners association. The other, that is the recommendation you had in the staff packet. And it was indicated in the executive summary, you would have found it in the executive summary, that if the city engineer did not approve the construction plans for the area being added before this meeting, staff will recommend that this be tabled. The standard procedure in subdivision development and the subdivision regulations also specify that a final plat cannot be approved. You cannot even approve a final plat when the construction plans for the subdivisions have not even been approved, at least by the city engineer. So contrary to what you just did with Acre PD, with Acre PD, the construction plans have been reviewed and approved. In this particular case, the area that is being added, the construction plans have not yet been reviewed and approved, but they have been submitted to the city engineer. They were submitted last week, I believe, and it takes him time to review these plans. I am not so sure whether before this gets to the Board of Alderman meeting next week, Tuesday, he would have reviewed and approved them. But you may consider recommending it subject to him approving this before approving the plans before they are considered by the Board of Alderman. That may be a kind of a middle ground on this. I will not be confident presenting a final plat before the Board of Alderman for approval when the construction plans for the particular area have not even been approved by the city engineer. That's just too much liability for the city. So the middle ground on this may be for these to be recommended to the Board of Alderman for approval subject to these conditions, including a condition that the city engineer approves the final plat approves the construction plans before the Board of Alderman acts on the item. That concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Any questions of staff? And once again, you're recommending it subject to the city engineer approving the final plat before the Board of Aldermen. That needs to be added to this, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So all these 6 conditions plus the city engineer approving the construction plans.
Construction plans.
Construction plans for the
Okay.
area being added before the Board of Alderman acts on this final plat.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, if someone please come forward.
How y'all doing? Henry Porter with WH Porter, 6555 Privacy Parkway, Memphis, Tennessee, 38119. So kind of going off of what we said on the preliminary plat was that, we shifted the pool down. And we shifted the pool down. It was kind of the intent to actually move this to another phase, but based on the preliminary plan, it needed to be built in phase 1. So we ended up working with the town to kind of figure out a way, or the city, figure out a way that we could shift that down and actually meet the requirements of the original project text for the overall development. And so what we ended up coming up with was if we moved that down to the common open space 5, then we would have to extend this road on down to get over to it. And the town, I guess city, asked us to actually loop the right-of-way all the way around that common open space, which we had actually, we're gonna try to extend it down to that common open space to actually meet the same requirements to provide public right-of-way to that common open space 5. It's actually kind of extended our scope on this to be able to meet the requirements of phase 1 to get that pool in, but we're more than willing to try to get that and reach that. But again, moving that pool down, we felt like the intent of this was to make it safer, make it better for the community. And so in doing that, it has expanded our scope on this phase. But I guess kind of moving off of, I was gonna kind of address the trail coming down where we originally had the pool. And before we shifted that down, we wanted to actually provide a common open space up on the north side in the future part of phase 1, right? Really phase 1B, that would give you an access down to the old position of the pool. And in moving the pool over, we didn't really feel it was necessary to actually have that trail there anymore because it didn't take you anywhere. So we were actually proposing to remove that since it wasn't truly necessary in this point anymore. And I guess, I want to kind of address one more thing on here was that we did split phase 1 up into 2 phases, phase 1A and phase B, or phase 1B. Originally, we came in with 96 lots in 2022. The market was completely different at that point. Interest rates weren't quite what they are today, and it's a lot more expensive. It kind of limited us to go in with a smaller phase that's a little more manageable to be able to build at one time, and then basically come in almost immediately within this next phase that was a little more manageable to build and sell the houses on. So that was one of the main reasons why we came in the first place and did this as 2 phases. Splitting that originally that phase 1 into 2 phases. But if y'all have any questions.
Okay. Any questions? No further questions then. Thank you. Okay, anyone here wishes to speak in favor or opposition of this application? If not, then we'll close the public discussion, and now we'll open it to the discussion or motions from the commissioners.
I make a motion that we recommend this application to the Board of Aldermen. I do want to add a condition. We'll do 1 through 6 and then add a 7th condition that the city, subject to the city engineer approving the construction plans for the final plat before the Board of Aldermen.
Okay. We have the motion by Ms. Remack to approve the application subject to the conditions plus the city engineer approval of the construction plans. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Ms. Singer. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And then the motion carries and the application is approved. Thank you so much for your input on this. Okay, now am I right to say that we're at the point for the discussion of the zoning?
I don't know whether planning commissioners have copies of the text, or do you need me to give you a copy? Anybody needs a copy?
I have mine.
I
Everybody?
need a copy.
You need a copy, ma'am.
I do not have a. Did I miss it?
We're talking about,
I'm sorry. Oh, okay, sorry.
I can't prepare.
think to kind of begin on this working session, this is really a working session. This is not an item for the Planning Commission to make a vote on. And it's open to the public. I think we have one person from the public here. If there are any comments from the public, they will be welcome. So I think to kind of begin with this, I would like to know whether planning commissioners from the packet that you had for the past 1 month or so, if there are any specific comments that you want us to pay attention to before I get to the specific items that I may want to highlight. Are there any specific things you want us to discuss? Now will be the time. Now will be the time, and that will come. That's a good point to bring forward for discussion. That will come from the packet that you have. If you go to page convenience. If you go to page 59. If you go to page 59. Under retail/restaurant, third row from the bottom, it says convenience store with fuel pumps. Are we together?
Yeah.
Okay, so it says convenience store with fuel pumps. And it has, there is a reference number to that particular use, number 26. So if we go to page 74, if you go to page 74, right at the top, that's where you have the conditions for convenience store with fuel pumps, right at the top. So it basically says in the neighborhood commercial, highway commercial, old town district, a shopping center, general commercial, light industrial, and heavy industrial districts. In addition to meeting all general criteria for conditional use permit, convenience store with fuel pumps must meet all of the following requirements. So if we wanted even to add the caddy corner, you know, that will be where it will have to be added. So right now, the 4 conditions that we currently have in the code, which are repeated there, are basically the side must be a hard corner at a signalized intersection. There shall be no more than 2 such stores at a 4-way intersection. There shall be no more than 1 such store at a T intersection, and the Board of Adjustment may impose other conditions as necessary to foster public safety, health, and general welfare. So if the Planning Commission deemed it necessary to add that there must be at an X, so to speak, then that will have to be added there, and that the pumps have to be at the back. You may want to consider the element of residential. If it adjoins residential, it would be a bad idea to put the pumps facing, you know, the houses. So
the reason, I feel like I should clarify that, the reason that in the thought process behind that is, you know, we have a few projects that we submitted at Collierville and Germantown and in South Haven, and I'm noticing more and more almost every municipality is making that a requirement, because aesthetically, and I mean, in our market, it's yet to be proven, but I have seen it in like Texas, California, and other markets where when a gas station is part of a larger development, like a 10-acre development or a 20-acre development, you're not hindering your traffic flow, because if you're pulling traffic from, like, let's say your grocery store, or if you have a bigger development in the back, I mean, all those people there are that's actually fronting them instead of fronting the street, and you also get to kind of continue it with your landscaping and stuff like that on the front. So instead of staring at a big parking lot, you're staring at nice trees and landscaping and stuff like that. It is something new, but it's something that I have noticed that a lot of municipalities are pushing for that a lot more. Even in the city of Memphis, we have had a couple of sites that they're like, hey, put the store on the front corner, and we've had to maneuver our setbacks around a little bit. It's, again, it's very different, and, you know, I think that store that in the church,
if that is the direction, wording is something I can always formulate after this meeting, but I just need to know whether that's a policy direction you want to go. And there are advantages to doing it that way. Generally, gas canopies are more like the accessory element to the building itself. So really what you've got, the principal structure on that side is the store, is the building. The canopy is really just accessory. You can remove the canopy and you still have a building, a convenience store building standing right there. And when you have the canopy in the front, the canopy becomes the defining feature of your intersection, not the building. But when you have the building in the front, then the building kind of dresses up that intersection. And the way you often want to put it is, instead of having, I'm sorry, I need to draw this, I don't know if you can see. If you have the intersection this way, and this is the corner that you're dealing with, instead of putting the building like this, with a canopy here, you will position the building this way. So the building is kind of at an angle. So it faces both sides. And once the building is at an angle, then you put your palms behind here. Behind here, it is still very visible from this road, and it is still visible from this road when you angle it. So it's not really kind of tucked at the back, not visible and unsafe, so to speak. It is still visible from the road. It's just that the canopy is not facing the intersection and defining that particular intersection, but it's still visible from both roads.
But it would not work if you were adjoining a residential neighborhood, then you'd have your canopies facing that residential, so
That would
you.
be horrible at 305 if you're.
Yes.
Canopies 20 feet
That's
away.
my question, how do you word it as to what areas, only on commercial sections only, or?
It will only apply in those instances where the property does not back up to a residential neighborhood.
I would suggest you could add an E, something like the Board of Adjustment may consider a requirement to place the fuel pump canopy in the rear of the building, provided that, and then a song could expound on what he's talking about over there and write it right into the code as a draft. I did want to mention one other item on fuel canopies and C-stores. We did put a policy in our comprehensive plan that specifically states that we would consider adding requirements for electrical charging facilities at C-stores, so that may be something else that we may need to write in this particular section, because it is something we did put in the comp plan.
Of course, I would agree with that, because technology is changing and there are more and more electric vehicles or hybrids out there. So I certainly think that that's forward thinking, and I think that's something we need to consider. I also think that we need to consider that these developers need to have freedom of design too, and I just want to keep that open, and I want to make sure that when we're talking about commercial districts, especially, that we allow for competition in the way that they are positioned on those lots. Those are highly visible lots, and that's a competitive edge that people have, and so I think we just need to keep that in mind.
So what is the next item on the agenda? What do you recommend?
So I want to be sure that I have 2 points that I've taken note of as far as the convenience store and fuel pumps element is concerned. The BZA considering the location of the fuel pumps at the back, because excluding when you have residential scenario, and the addition of a certain number of, and we'll get a percentage. Other cities have done this.
Yeah.
I can always check and get a certain number minimum that needs to be provided for electric chargers, electric charging on those sites. Okay. Those are the 2 policy directives that I have. Are we okay with those 2?
Is everyone okay with that?
Okay.
So,
Any other point before I get on my own things that I want to call attention to? No. All right, in your packet, please go to page 13. Page 13. What I intend to point attention to are what we may say are key policy changes from that kind of deviate from what we've been doing right up to this point. And I want to make sure that everybody is on board, or that the Planning Commission is okay with that, because this development somehow will be coming back before you, and it will be necessary that you know ahead of time what this is. This has to do with the residential townhouse district. So right now in the zoning code, there is no residential townhouse district. There is no ROTH. Anybody who comes to the city wanting to build townhouses or condos, so to speak, you have to do it they are done in the context of PDs. For example, is it Cedar, what's the one?
Reserve at Cedar Bluff.
Preserve at Cedar Bluff. So that is done in the context of a PD. If this is approved and we have property that is zoned ROTH, or an applicant comes to the city and requests that property be rezoned from whatever zoning district to ROTH for them to do condo project or residential townhomes, then you will not have a PD tax. There will not be a PD. What you will have, it will go through a subdivision process, treated just the same as any other single family, because these condos are essentially really single family homes. It's just that they adjoin each other. The buildings adjoin each other. And so you will have a preliminary plat. If it's a rezoning, the rezoning request will come before you like any other rezoning request, accompanied by the preliminary plat, which will show the layout of those buildings, how everything is going to be laid out. But there will not be a project text. So you will still get to vet the preliminary plat. And these are building and minimum standards of design. Minimum. You cannot order in the approval of the preliminary plat, but I wanted to point out these 5. If there are others that you think are very important and should be included in the code and not be left to discretion from property to property, then this will be time to point them out. The first being, there shall be no more than 8 attached units in one townhouse building. No more than 8. You don't want to have a long thing that looks like an apartment. No more than 8. There shall be a minimum of 15 feet separation between the buildings. Each townhouse building shall be a minimum 75 brick masonry type construction. That generally follows the pattern of single-family residential homes in this city. So it's basically compatibility with the general design of single-family neighborhoods in the city. The minimum heated square footage of a 1 to 2 bedroom townhouse unit will be 1,400 square feet. The minimum heated square footage for a 3 or more bedroom townhouse unit will be 1,600 square feet. These are exclusive of open porches, garages, and basements. And lastly, a minimum of 1 car garage shall be provided for 2 or less bedroom townhouse units, and a minimum of 2 car garages shall be provided for 3 or more bedroom units. That generally follow the standard for constructing single-family houses in the city. Any comment on this?
There's no PD, but there can still be like HOA and covenants and restrictions.
Yes, sir. Yes. Yes. Yes.
I think one of the differences between the townhouse, it's a different form of multifamily, but basically the property line goes in the common wall between the walls, so you can envision it's the same as a plat like you saw tonight, except the lots are basically smaller, and then the ones that would be widened out would be the ones for the end units, you know, because a townhouse, again, it's usually 2 stories, maybe 3 stories, but, you know, garage at the lower level, and then, you know, the unit is all basically on top of each other. This is distinct between a multifamily unit that are stacked on top of each other. You know, these aren't really stacked on top of each other, they're side to side.
Like an old brownstone.
Exactly. And so, you know, everything's the same as you'd find in a single-family subdivision, covenants and restrictions, all of that stuff, except it's just, again, smaller lots. and you got public rights of way. They could be private roads too, but, or rights of way in front, but, essentially it's exactly the same as single family, except the units are attached to each other.
Is there no provision to require rear loading garages for attached townhomes?
Well, that's something you could consider. That's
If
again,
you wanted to have that, this is where it needs to be added.
I mean, you got 8 units stacked together,
Yeah,
I don't know
exactly.
where you gonna put carports. It's gonna deteriorate from the appearance of the townhome if you put them in front, so.
Yeah, that's great.
now the ones at the preserve at Cedar Bluff are in front, but they're, those are private roads in that particular one.
Where is that location?
That's over, near Chateau Ridge, near the hospital, in that area.
Now I take back my comment. Just E, above where we're reading, same page 13, parking requirements. Number 3, unless the townhouses are in a private gated community without a public through street, the parking spaces shall be located in the rear yard area.
Okay.
Okay, there you go.
Very good.
You
You
thought
got
of
it in there pretty
everything.
fast, it's like, song something.
All right, any other comment? No. We go to page 15. M, right there in the middle, I think I already mentioned that in terms of the approval process. So the approval process will basically be the same as that for a major subdivision. You will have a preliminary plat, so what will come before you in the approval of any townhouse, you have a complete application will consist of a completed preliminary plat application form and review fee, a subdivision preliminary plat containing all the data for preliminary plat as stipulated in the subdivision regulations, and a landscape plan sheet. So wherever you're going to plant trees, so landscaping helps to create a sense of what the final product will really look like. That's the element about landscaping. It really gives you aesthetic. So, and then the rest of the process will just be the same as for major subdivisions. All right. Page 19, please. This has to do with neighborhood commercial district. What is currently your C1, where most of the gas stations we are dealing with are currently located, are often located. So this is your neighborhood commercial district. Where this district can be created. The reason I'm bringing this up is it's not uncommon to have a property owner apply for their property to be rezoned from one district to another. But if the zoning ordinance specifies where a particular zone can be created, and an application does not meet those minimum location criteria, then we will not even accept the application. So that's why I'm bringing this up to your attention. Let's not have a situation in tomorrow where somebody shows up and says, I asked staff to rezone my property and they will not even accept my application. If you receive a call, this is the reason for it. Location criteria for neighborhood commercial. Generally, this district should be located in one of the following areas. It has to be adjacent to residential neighborhoods. That's the reason why it is called a neighborhood commercial. 2, it has to be at the entrance to the residential neighborhood, not within. You cannot go to the center of a residential neighborhood, and create a neighborhood commercial district. You cannot go to the center of Margaret Manor, for example, and take the little square there, or the circle, and turn it into a neighborhood commercial district. No, it has to be at the edge, at the outside. It has to also be at the intersection of arterial and collector roads, arterial and local streets, or collector and local streets adjacent to, within, or at the entrance of the residential neighborhood. Often, the streets that are within the subdivision are all local streets. They are generally all local streets. But the ones that are at the edges are often either arterial or collector, or maybe an arterial and a local street. So this is really just emphasizing, if you're going to have a commercial development in a residential area,
The street capacity, you have to pay attention to the street capacity. And local streets generally do not have the capacity to carry commercial traffic. They just don't. They are just meant for residential, two-way traffic within the residential development. So this is the location criteria. Number 2, and that is very important, the mid-block location of this district shall be discouraged and avoided. So if it is proposed mid-block, the application generally will not be accepted. It has to be at an intersection, so to speak. Are we okay? Any comments on this policy direction? Does the board have any problem with this? Anything? All right, we're good on that. Page 20. Page 20. Just flip, please, at the back. Right at the top, still in the neighborhood commercial district. Subdivision site planning required. This is something we've not been doing. Subdivision site planning required. Within the neighborhood commercial district, any subdivision of land shall address curb cut or driveway numbers and location, and permanent cross-access easement interconnectivity with adjoining commercial lot, and specifications shall be made on the subdivision plat to this effect. What this means is, at the time somebody is platting a piece of property that is zoned neighborhood commercial, on that plat, we need to address where the driveways are going to be. If the Planning Commission wants to restrict the driveways only to the arterial roads, then you have to make that requirement on the subdivision plat at the time of platting. So subdivision site platting would be required. E at the bottom, for highway commercial district. This is like Goodman Road. That is your highway commercial district. If you figure out, if you just have Goodman Road in your head, this is where we are. Subdivision site planning shall also be required. We have the problems we have on Goodman Road today because most of them were platted without subdivision site planning. You didn't have the interconnectivity that we needed. The lots were just simply created without subdivision site planning. We have the same problem on Germantown Road and Highway 305 right down to Church. We have a similar problem because of this. So within the highway commercial district, any subdivision of land shall address curb cut or driveway numbers and their location, and permanent cross-access easement interconnectivity with adjoining lots and specifications shall likewise be made on the subdivision plat to this effect. So all new developments on already platted lots shall provide for cross-access interconnectivity with adjoining lots on the site plan. On the site plan, it's already platted. We want to see it to full extent possible we can get those interconnectivity and avoid cars constantly entering the highway, and then just immediately turning back onto the adjoining lot. Those are really creating significant traffic problems.
Just so I understand, let's say if there's already a commercial building on lot 1 and they're planning lot 2, 3, and 4, lot 1 has a curb cut already, let's say along Cooper Road. So lot 2 would have to have access to lot 1 in order to avoid each of those lots having their own individual curb cuts.
Lots 2, 3, and 4 at the time of subdivision will have to address where the curb cuts will be, such that we want them to share access. We want to reduce the number of curb cuts. That's very important.
With lot 1, if it's already there, like it's already been developed, everything for years, would they be under any obligation to give a curb cut to 2, 3, and 4?
No, sir.
Okay, so 2, 3, 4, gotta figure it out.
They got to figure it out. If it's already done, it's grandfather, so to speak. It's already done. Sometimes we're able to use our planning skills to negotiate with the owner of lot 1 to a point where they're able to connect to the existing lot 1. I've done that on a number of projects in other cities. And often they have no issue, especially if it makes their site safer and you're not removing their parking spaces. And then they will not bear any financial responsibility for creating that interconnectivity. They often have no issues.
So one of the points maybe to raise here is that what we're trying to create is a unified land development code, and we're kind of doing it in phases. So some of the changes that Asong just spoke about will also be incorporated, and then some of them are already there, into our subdivision regulation section of the code, which would just be another part of what would be a unified code. But because we're kind of doing it in phases, it's hard to do everything all in a single, swallow the entire apple. But I think that, that's definitely on the right track with what he's saying. And really, that goes in almost every zoning district. Some of those principles are applied in all zoning districts.
All right. Is the commission okay with that?
Yes.
Oh, thank you, ma'am. The next, let's go to page 32, please. Page 32. Page 32. Right at the bottom of the page. This has to do with what we are now calling a flexible commercial development district. What in the current zoning ordinance, that is C4. But the city attorney did not like the name holding district. So we had to look for something that will basically achieve the same purpose but not have holding in it, the word holding, for legal reasons. So creation of this particular district, just as you had for creation of the neighborhood commercial district, this can only be created under certain conditions. If somebody comes to the city and says, I want to create what would today be the C4 district, in what kind of locations can it be created? If the application does not meet these location criteria, staff will not even process it. It's a waste of time. The first, properties designated must meet all of the following criteria. It must be located along an arterial thoroughfare. It must be an arterial road. Church, Goodman, Hacks Cross, the big four lanes. So there's 4 or 5 lanes. Those are your arterial roads. If it is not arterial, it will not qualify. It must be at least 5 acres in size, because these are planned commercial developments. And lastly, have restrictive environmental natural features such as a lake within it, or be located in close proximity to uses such as hazardous waste facilities, like the property you just had there with Robinson Crossing, the one you just presented today. That's a C4 property which will qualify. It would have qualified under these particular regulations, because it has very specific elements that force it to be a planned commercial development. The very presence of a landfill, makes it necessary for that property to be developed in a way that different uses are permitted at the back as opposed to the front. The uses that are adjacent to a landfill needs to be different from the ones that are close to Church Road. So that needs to be a planned development. There are those features that would account for the piece of property being zone C4, so to speak. What this essentially does is, let's say where U-Haul is proposed to go in today, if that were zone C2, highway commercial, and U-Haul came in and wanted it to go C4, we will not support that, because we'll just be unnecessarily creating another project X, many more zoning districts in the city, instead of just doing straightforward commercial zoning district. It has no specific natural feature that lends itself to being or adjoining any kind of a land use element that lends itself to being a planned development. Any comments on those particular location criteria? No.
So I think the intent with this one, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like tonight's rezoning, the property was zone C4. And so, the idea would be, rather than having a C4 zone, it would be flexible commercial district, or FCD, but at the point that a project text and a development plan and everything were approved for that property, it would actually change to a planned development. So, when a song said FCD, it's basically a holding zone, but the attorney didn't like the idea of holding it, but essentially, that's what it means. But once that plan is adopted, then it shifts, the zoning actually changes, and it becomes a planned development, and it will say planned development on the zoning map.
So if you go to page 34, if you go to page 34, please. F2, page 34, F2, development approval process. In this particular flexible commercial district, F2, upon approval of the rezoning of the property and associated project narrative text and master plan, the property shall be classified as a planned development district. So that's exactly what Jason just explained. So on the map, it is FCD until the day that the Board of Aldermen approves the project text. Once the Board of Aldermen approves the project text, the color on the map is going to change from FCD to planned development because the project text has now been approved for it.
So, like, for example, the site that we had tonight, if it was still FCD, would the developer still be able to subdivide it off and say, okay, look, this is gonna be, all does it have to be all at one time?
He will have to do it all at one time.
Okay.
And I think this is very important to stress. Planned developments, properties that are designated for planned development are intended for the developer to think ahead of time what this property really should look like. Instead of us developing it piecemeal, without any thought process, it just appears haphazard. But when you give it some thought up front, we have had situations where some developers come in, you take a 92 acres, even this one. The developer comes in and says, can I just cut 1 acre of this entire 92 and just do a preliminary plan and be done with it? And we'll have to say, no, this is a planned development. You have to think about the entire property ahead of time, plan it ahead of time. Let us know how many driveways are going to be on Church Road, how many driveways are going to be on Pleasant Hill, instead of doing it piecemeal, every single lot with its own separate driveway, and we end up with nothing but strip commercial development. Let us have it planned, and you have maybe one sign, or maybe just a couple of signs that are shared by all the other uses in the development. You know, let it look like Old Town Park Center. If you took Old Town Park Center and you decided to develop it piecemeal, that will be one of the worst developments you will have in this city at that particular intersection of Hacks Cross and Goodman Road. That's the whole idea about having a planned development. We think ahead of time, we lay it out, the landscaping, how the streets are all going to look like, you know, the cross sections, all of that is thought of ahead of time.
This is basically to promote more stuff like a sign or cascades or something like that.
Yes,
Something
sir.
like that.
All
Yes.
of that is incorporated.
Yes, sir.
Now, like, again, using tonight's property for example, that's 92 acres, then over here is 5. Would they be able to say, okay, well, 10 acres, we're gonna do this, and then 10 acres, we're gonna do this? Would that be 2 separate?
No. The entire property, they will qualify for the PD because they are more than 5 acres. But they cannot come in and split 5 acres and develop it in piecemeal that way. No. You have to plan the entire 92 acres, and then you can develop it in phases. If they decide that phase 1 with just 5 acres, phase 2, 4 acres, phase 3, 20 acres, they can do that.
Basically like a residential subdivision, like at tonight, they say, okay, 40 lots here, and then
Yes, sir. Yes. All right. Is the commission okay with that? Thank you. The next is on page 36. I cannot stress on this enough. Page 36 is one of the main reasons we are going through this process. When I started working in the city of Olive Branch, I was shocked with the number of PDs that we had and the number of zoning districts. I went back yesterday and I was counting. Last time it was 111. We actually have, it was 311. We actually have 347 zoning districts. And part of it is, especially for residential developments, if a developer really doesn't like what we have in the code,
they just come up with a PD. They don't like what we have in the code. They just come up with a PD, create their own lots, and hope that is approved. Without any, the big thing about, or the key factor in creating a residential plan development, two elements. One, the applicant gets some flexibility, the developer gets some flexibility. But in exchange for that, the city gets amenities. That's the real thing about plan development. It's a give and take. The property is such that it doesn't lend itself really to strict conventional development, and so the city says, okay, have some flexibility. We allow you some more density or so. But in exchange for that, there has to be some public benefit. And it's usually in terms of amenities. PDs are sometimes used to reduce the pressure, the strain on the city's public parks infrastructure. And so within those PDs, you provide those amenities like swimming pools. You know, those are recreational amenities within the subdivision. We've had PDs where the only amenity that is being provided is a common open space with 3 trees. Like, how is this an amenity? I don't understand. You know, so page 36 from the top, requirements for qualification as a plan development. That's a key element. To qualify for a plan development, if an applicant came in, the developer came in today and said, I want to do a PD, a plan development in the city, to qualify, 1 or 3 of those criteria will have to be met at a minimum to qualify, not the design, to even be considered for the plan development. The project qualifies as a conservation design development by incorporating a cluster development pattern. We did talk about cluster development when we were doing the comprehensive plan. I don't want to go into details on that. Jason can speak more on that than I can. The second, the project qualifies as a mixed-use plan development by meeting all of the following conditions. It needs to be mixed use, or you can also be mixed use, involving a mixture of at least 2 of the following: residential, commercial, or institutional, and 3, having at least 1 center and an edge. The rest is just a definition of what that means. The third criteria, the project qualifies as a commercial suburb by meeting all of the following. The use of the word suburb is intentional. This is to maintain the character of Olive Branch, as opposed to creating the sort of PDs that you have in New York, skyscraper PDs, if I can put it that way. Consists of shopping centers, strip centers, supercenters, malls, or other combined commercial projects totaling more than 50,000 square feet, including out parcels. Assimilates various uses on a unified street system. This is like Oak Park Town Center, to some extent. We really kind of meet this, although it also meets the mixed-use feature. Includes excellence in the architecture of structures, unified scale and proportionality shared by buildings, street furniture, lighting standards, streets and parking lots, the use of window displays, and convenience of parking relative to sidewalks. And accommodates automobile traffic but does not allow it to dominate the land use patterns or design quality. Oaktown Park Center was really done well in the sense that you don't have parking spaces all facing Hacks Cross Road and Goodman Road. So if that property is fully built as it is designed, when you're driving on Hacks Cross Road or on Goodman Road, you will not be seeing a sea of asphalt. What you will see is architecture, is building design. So that is what is being encouraged in our PD developments for commercial properties or mixed-use properties. Instances where all you've got is a single-family residential subdivision without any clustering, and all the developer is trying to do is to create lots that are smaller than 6,000 square feet, will not qualify as a PD. The applicant will just have to develop them as a conventional standard subdivision. Because in those particular instances, the city is really getting nothing. All the applicant is just getting is density, while the city gets nothing. There's no public benefit, so to speak. Any comments? Institutional uses includes things like City Hall, that's an institution. You also have quasi-institutions like hospitals, schools, those are all institutions. Churches. And we have now created the institutional district. If you want to do just a conventional, outside of a PD context, there is an institutional public district where the hospital will fit in. One area that, if this is approved by the board, we will be rezoning it to an institutional public district is right here beside the area where you have the YMCA. You have a church, the YMCA, and then you've got a park. So you've got a lot of public and quasi-public infrastructure in that whole area. It will qualify for in the IP designation. So.
I know right now there's like, when you look at distance requirements for like liquor licenses or breeding licenses and stuff like that, it differs if, let's say if there's a church or a daycare and it's on a commercial zone site, it's a different requirement than it would be if that was like on a residential site or an agricultural site or something like that. So how would they differentiate from like the institutional use zoning? Would that be like the same as the other one, or would it differ?
I'm not so sure I got a question.
So let's say if somebody built if there was a strip center and somebody wanted to put a liquor store in there, and there was a church 200 feet away, the requirements are if that church is zoned residential or commercial, or not commercial, anything other than commercial, it's like a 400-foot distance requirement or something like that. And if that church was on a commercial zone property, then the distance requirement would be 100 feet. So like they vary from like zoning to zoning. So how would like institutional zoning fall on that?
We'll have to look into that. I'm not sure what the answer is
Sure.
to that
Yeah.
question.
I know like cannabis dispensaries and stuff are pretty sensitive to that as well, like the distance requirement from like churches and daycare.
That doesn't really differentiate the zoning
The zones.
district that the church or the daycare or anything is on. It just says church or daycare, yeah, so.
I'm not, we'll have to check on that, but I'm not so sure there is a difference in the zoning districts. I think it's just, you have to be a certain distance from a church, you have to be a certain distance from a daycare.
That's
I
what it
don't
is,
think
yeah.
it specifies that it has to be a district.
I ran into that situation in Fort Lake when we were building site and there was a daycare within 112 feet of that site. And a tenant wanted to put a liquor store in one of those centers. And they actually measured, they said, well, what's the zoning on the daycare? And it was 112 feet, or they said, what's the zoning on the daycare? And it was C2, or whatever Fort Lake's code was. They said, the state said, well, then it's only 100 feet. Had it been anything other than commercial, it would have been 400 feet, and you wouldn't have been able to get that licensing.
Okay.
And that was just something that we ran into in the past when we were like that was first. So I think, yeah, if something is zoned institutional, it should be, the extent of it should be 400 feet, that should qualify for that, right?
It's hard to say. We'll have to just see what the rules say on it. I don't think we were anticipating that a small daycare center would be, kind of spot zone for institutional. I think we were looking more like, a large church like, the Methodist church, like a song set, or the YMCA. You might use the institutional zoning category for those. And just to remind, y'all that this is going to be a two-part process. Our first step is to establish all these new zoning districts and get them into code, and they would essentially become effective at the date that we had a second stage of this project which would be adopting a new citywide zoning map. So it's really going to be a two-phased project.
All right, thank you we'll check on that and get back to you next month. The next is on page 41.
38, sorry, 38. Oh, that's not necessary. That's not necessary. I think I've touched on that already. General criteria. Page 46, please. Page 46. Page 46. Right there in the middle, number 2. This has to do with residential density for planned developments. As I did mention, PDs kind of like a give and take. In exchange for density, you give some public benefit. And what we have had in the city for PDs right up to this point has been that there is really no maximum density that a developer can propose in a residential PD. Anybody just design as many lots as they can fit in there. That's basically the way it has been. What this does is it creates a maximum in the density that you can have, which is essentially 125% of the maximum net density of the underlying base zone district. So it puts a limit on the density that you can have in whatever particular district that you are proposing for the PD. Page 4.
Song, do you mean sub-districts there?
Sub-districts.
Is that what you're
Where?
trying to say with base district? What do you mean by base district in that one?
The maximum net residential density shall be determined by the mayor. However, the maximum density shall not exceed 125% of the maximum net density of the underlying. The base.
What do you mean by the underlying base zoning district?
So if you have a PD, if an applicant comes in and proposes to do a PD, let's say they want to turn, let's say you had a piece of property that was zone R8, for example.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I didn't realize that's what you meant by
Yeah.
that. Okay,
So
I
if
got
you,
what you're saying.
okay. Okay. All right. Let's go to page 47. Just your very next page, page 47. There is a table there at the top. That table is very important. And the most important thing in that table is the second row. The minimum lot size for any single family in any PD, minimum lot size for the single family residential development that will be permitted in the city of Olive Branch with the adoption of this will be 6,000 square feet. So PDs where you have developers coming, some of them are proposing even 4,300 square feet lot sizes. And sometimes we have to see that pre-apps meeting and go back and forth, change it, before you ever get to 6,000. With this being adopted, that becomes the law of the land. Is the commission okay with that 6,000 square feet, please?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Page 48. I want to deal with these PDs today. Page 48. Project 48 and 49. But let me begin with 48. One of the things that I've noticed with PD project text is everybody comes in, they write a project text. You pick up a project text for Wealth Hospitality. The table of content is totally different from the one for the Cascade. The Cascade is different from the one for Old Town. Cascade maybe addresses signs, where Hospitality does not address signs. It's all different. You know, we want to make sure that project texts that we have are consistent. That's basically what these two sections are intended to address. What should we see in the project text for the PD, and we make sure that they are consistent all through. If you pick up a PD text, you know what is supposed to be in there, you know where to go get it. And so the project narrative is supposed to have all those elements A to U. and be clearly laid out as such. All those issues have to be clearly addressed. You know, a general statement which introduces the projects, summarizes it, and justifies the contextual community need of the proposed development. Why do we need this PD in this city? What's the public need for it? Because it's an act of rezoning. What is the public need for it? It needs to be addressed. The development design vision, you know, what is the whole vision? Overall, what are you trying to create? Sometimes when I ask a developer, what is the vision here? They say, well, we just want to put a building. I'm like, okay. We're doing a project text just to put a building. We have to go through planning commission and board of aldermen and go through all this just to put a building. What is this? You know, what is the overall vision? We need that to be addressed. Conformity with the comprehensive and specific plan goals. If a specific plan means if a specific land use area plan has been adopted by the city for that particular area, then the PD that you are proposing should conform with the goals and policies of that particular plan. If Maywood subdivision, for example, came up and said, oh, we want to do an area plan for Maywood, maybe that would extend to, I don't know, maybe 78, you know, to State Line Road. And we did an area plan, and somebody came on and said, I want to do a PD in that area. That PD should not only conform with the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, but also with the goals and policies of that area plan. That's what I see it is intended to do. And then description of the property, a surveyor's plat or meets and bounds narrative will suffice. The existing conditions, including any pictures and a description of any spatial features and any environmentally sensitive areas need to be provided. If there are lakes there to be preserved, we want to know. You know, that helps us with integrating those existing features into the general land use plan of the project. Proposed uses, bulk and yard requirements like setbacks, height, parking, landscaping and screening, open space, signs, buildings architecture, roadways, access and circulation, sanitary sewer facilities and services. That should be addressed. We shouldn't get to the point of construction before discovering that we don't even have sewer capacity. It needs to be addressed in the project text. Water services, electricity and natural gas, stormwater drainage facilities and services, where would they be on this property? Any phasing plan, development schedule and platting, those elements need to be addressed. Preliminary description of plans for covenants, uses and continuous maintenance provisions for the project. That just need to be preliminary. And any impact on community facilities or any other engineering information. Those are the minimum that we want included in the project text. And then the rest are just simply diagrams that we would like to be shown. That concludes my comments for tonight. Are we good? That was pretty good. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.